So we have
2:05, maybe we should get started.
Yeah. All right, we have someone else joining. So turn your cameras on so we can see you all. And we will switch to speaker view shortly, but let's see everybody first. Well, we can see most of you.
Hi, Jason.
Liz.
All right.
Oh, his proud mom and dad.
Hey, Mom. Hey, Dad.
Linda, you're muted.
You're on
Linda,
mute.
Marvin, there you go.
Yes, we are, purposely.
On purpose.
By purpose.
Hanan,
That's great.
welcome to our small community.
Yeah.
What
That's
a
great.
great energy. This is such a great energy here. It really feels like a family. You're so blessed. And hi, Jason. I mean, we just met, but I feel like I just want to say that too. So
Good to see you.
That's great. Okay. So welcome, everyone. Glad you all can join us. And for those who are not here, we will be posting this. We're recording and we'll be posting this Zoom chat on our website in the next couple of days. So more of you can be able to see it again and have your friends see it as well. So my name is Teven Laxer and I'm the director of the Sacramento Jewish Film Festival. We are sponsored by the Jewish Federation of the Sacramento region and the Sacramento Jewish Community Relations Council. We all welcome you to this chat. We'll be talking about the film About a Teacher, and we'll be talking about teaching in today's public school system. So again, welcome everyone. We're so happy you can join us. I'm going to switch this to speaker view now. And so I'd like to just talk about the program. We're going to start off with some prepared questions for our panel members, followed by questions from the audience. And please enter your questions in the chat room, which you see on the bottom of your screen. And as I said, the Zoom recording will be available on our website. So this afternoon, we're very pleased to introduce two panel members. We have with us Hanan Harchol and Jason Kamras. Over the years, the Sacramento Jewish Film Festival has presented several of Hanan's animated films, which deal with subjects like faith, humility, and forgiveness. About a Teacher is Hanan's first feature film. It dramatizes his first 3 years as a teacher in New York City's public school system. Hanan has also been a professional classical guitar player. He's a professional animator, and he's produced several award-winning CDs. Many of you already know Jason Kamras, who was born here in Sacramento and whose family has been members of the Mosaic Law Congregation for many years. Jason taught in the Washington, D.C. public school system. He was the National Teacher of the Year in 2005. He's also worked as an administrator in the Washington, D.C. public school system for many years before becoming superintendent of schools in Richmond, Virginia. So welcome, Hanan and Jason. So we have a couple of prepared questions, as I've said. We will post the first question in our chat room. I'd like to ask each of you, what inspired you to become a public school teacher? So let's start with Hanan.
okay, and what I'm going to do, I'm going to just quickly close the window because there's a siren, but I'll be right there.
Okay, excellent.
While Hanan's doing that, let me just, for the record, note I was born in New York, even though I love Sacramento.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought you were born here. I'm so sorry.
You
I
were
should
6
have checked.
years old, right? You were 6 when you came to Sacramento?
I don't know. Mom, Dad, how old were we?
5 or 6?
He was 4.
4.
4.
Okay.
Michael was 6.
Michael was, okay. And Jeremy was
2.
2. Okay.
Family planning, 2, 4, and 6. There you go.
So to answer your question, I decided to become a teacher at age 39 for all the wrong reasons, for every single possible wrong reason. I was very, very much focused on myself. I had a successful art career that I was supporting as a professional guitarist, and all of my gigs dried up in the 2008 crash, and I was getting married, and I decided we were going to have kids, and I want to have something that'll give me a stable income. So why don't I just become a teacher? Let me become a high school teacher. It'll be super easy, and I'll get off at 2 p.m. and I'll be able to work on my paintings and my art from about 3 p.m. till about 11, and I'll get up the next day and I'll be a teacher. So I became a teacher for all of the wrong reasons. And I think that this was just part of God's plan, because teaching ended up, my students ended up becoming my biggest life teachers. It's like they say in Pirkei Avot, of all of these, my students were I learned from the most. So I became a teacher for all the wrong reasons. And luckily I got a big kick in the pants.
Jason.
Sure. Well, first, I just want to recognize Liz, who was one of my very first teachers, and express my great appreciation to you, Liz, for showing me and many others the way. I don't know if folks on the call know this, but Liz was about 30 years ahead of the curve on all things education. So I didn't know it as a kid, but now as an educational professional, recognize a lot of the techniques and approaches that she used were really quite innovative. So anyway, thank you, Liz. Big shout out to you and to all the great folks at the Shalom Day School. I became a teacher. I was on my way to law school in college. I took the LSAT. I filled out the applications. I was all ready to go, largely because I was really interested in social justice work and was convinced that becoming a lawyer was the best way to do that. But then the summer of my junior year, I was a Vista volunteer at home in Sacramento, and ended up working with students in like a summer enrichment program. And I really fell in love with it. And I realized I really enjoyed working with kids. And I was really struck by the inequities that I saw in terms of what kind of opportunities that the young people I was working with had relative to the kinds of opportunities that I had growing up in Sacramento. And that just struck me as, basically patently unfair. And so kind of the motivation to address that inequity, combined with just enjoying working with kids and enjoying the craft of teaching, led me to kind of check the law school path and go into education. And I love both of my brothers who have law degrees, but I'm very grateful that I did not go to law school.
Great. So thank you both. Now, moving on to another topic. It's, as many of you know, and as the film portrays, it's very difficult to be a teacher nowadays in our school system, especially in public schools. And many teachers leave after 1, 2, or 3 years. And the film, as you know, portrays the difficulties Hanan had as, in his first 3 years of teaching in New York schools. So 2 questions I'd like to pose, and I'd love the 2 of you to just have a conversation about this. The first question is, why are so many teachers leaving the profession after the first couple of years? And how can we encourage more people to become teachers and to remain as teachers? So I know Jason, in the brief chat we had a few days ago, I know that you're you've been dealing with recruitment and retention of teachers. So that's very important to you, of course. And so again, how do we retain our teachers? How do we recruit them and retain them? And why are so many people leaving? So take it, either one of you start and, have a conversation between the two of you.
Well, we talked about this a few days ago. I think, Jason knows my theory on this. What I've met is I've met teachers that are coming into the profession with the best intentions. I mean, I thought it was so beautiful to hear what Jason was saying in terms of his, desire to help people, to fight the inequities. And I see so many teachers coming in for the right reasons, unlike me, coming in for the right reasons, really wanting to help. And I feel like teachers are not properly prepared. I feel like they're put into the system and they do not receive the proper training, and they're set up to fail. And I've seen many, many, many very smart, very well-intentioned young people leaving. And first of all, it hurts the kids so much. That's the main problem. But it also leaves the teachers coming in first feeling so excited and then leaving so demoralized. And I also see many administrators trying to help the teachers, doing their best, but it's like so little in such little dribs and drabs. And it's kind of like too little, too late. And it leads very well-intentioned, smart people coming into the profession to leave, which is why I made the movie, because my hope is the movie will begin a dialogue on how we can actually better support the teachers to stay and be better prepared, and end up having the experience that I'm having now with my students, which is so mutually beneficial. Jason, do you have any thoughts on this, or?
Yeah, and let me just preface my comments with the following disclaimer: nothing that I share today should be construed as representing Richmond Public Schools or the Richmond School Board. All right, now I have that out of the way. Yeah, I agree with everything Hanan said. I mean, basically we do everything wrong that we could possibly do when it comes to recruiting and retaining teachers, right? So first, we don't pay very well for one of the hardest jobs there is. Second, if we're lucky enough to get folks to join, as Hanan said, we do a pretty terrible job of training them. Most teacher preparation programs don't do a particularly good job of training teachers for the actual work of teaching. They do a pretty good job of teaching teachers about a lot of theories, but not literally what do I do on the first day. Then we ask teachers to do 100 things that have nothing to do with teaching. So all kinds of record keeping and all kinds of other analysis and whatnot. Again, things that just take away from the core work of thinking about your practice, planning for your lesson, and then executing on them. And then, fourth, I would say we don't do a good job of sort of kind of leaning into teachers' sort of unique strengths. So we kind of ask all teachers to do exactly the same thing. When we know some teachers are really good at planning and curriculum writing and others aren't. And some are really good at, small group work, and some are great at like whole class. And we don't really tap into that. We just say everybody needs to be great at everything. And that's, not really a recipe for success. It's not really how most professions work. So on all of those fronts, we're doing the exact wrong thing. And I'm trying to change that in Richmond, but these things take time.
I think you're a hero as a superintendent for acknowledging something like that. I mean, I've never heard a superintendent say something like you just said. I mean, in so brave, so wonderful, and I think so honest. And I think that I just want to add on to that last point that you were saying, that different people are good at different things, have different strengths, etc. And there really could be a synergy, if there were relatively simple things to implement, but that would cost money. But, the ability for teachers to be able to observe other teachers in a very, very consistent way, where they can observe and learn from each other, what ends up happening is with these theories, first of all, this is definitely not to put anybody on the spot, but just by a sign of hands, just so that I know how many people have actually seen the film. Just, okay, so it's the vast majority of people. So I'm still not going to give away any spoilers, but I am going to be mentioning, you know, a couple of things from the film. For anybody who is an administrator, they know about the Danielson model. The Danielson model is kind of this highly theoretical system that was then used by a large portion of the country to evaluate teachers. And essentially, the Danielson theoretical model is that learning happens better instead of the teacher standing up front, the way we all learned, and the teacher kind of lecturing and the students taking notes. The Danielson model says instead of the teacher leading the class, the students are going to lead the class, and they're going to lead the class in discussions with each other and projects in which they're kind of learning in groups from each other, and they retain the information better, and they listen much better, and have much more accountability and much more participation if they're working in these small groups that's student-led. And if you notice, by the end of the film, the Hanan character is actually implementing the Danielson model, right? Is everybody seeing that? The problem is no one actually teaches people how to implement the Danielson model. We're going to come in and we're going to evaluate you based on the Danielson model, but no one's going to actually demonstrate what that looks like. So we have these things called PDs, professional development, but it's too little, too late in these little drips and drabs. So they'll take someone who's very experienced and say, well, this is how I do it. And they'll do that for 45 minutes or an hour, but they won't actually show, well, okay, so I showed how it's done in a filmmaking class, but how is it done in a math class? Or how it might be, I might be able to show how it's done when we're critiquing films, but how do you implement the Danielson model when you're doing pre-production or something else? So what happens is very experienced teachers come to me quietly, secretly, and say, you know, I got a bad evaluation, you know, can you help me out? And I look at their lesson plan and I see what they're doing, or I come in and observe them, and I can very quickly say, you're kind of doing the right thing. If you would just change this, or just try this, or this, or this, in 2 or 3 things, I can advise them how they can instantly make their class so much better. But we're never given the chance to do that to teachers, for teachers. You know, and instead I was offered, well, would you like to become an assistant principal? We think you'd be a great assistant principal. Hell no, of course I don't want to be an assistant principal, because I don't want to be the person walking in with a clipboard evaluating you on something that you never got training on how to do. It's demoralizing for me, it's demoralizing for you. You're just afraid. Instead, what I'd like to do is I'd like to be part of the system that changes the whole system, but do it from the ground up as a teacher, not as an administrator. Does this make sense? So more to be said on that later.
And so I don't know, most of you know that I try to teach teachers how to teach the Holocaust, which is a difficult subject under difficult circumstances. And the first thing we tell the teachers is, don't teach it in September.
Don't what?
Don't teach it in September. And you have to develop a relationship with your class. Now, each teacher will do it differently, but being aware that you cannot really teach until you have a relationship with the students. And so I think the Danielson model works, but it will only work after you have found a way to link yourself into the lives of the students. And it will be different every time. So just being aware and teacher to teacher exploring this facet of teaching is helpful. And so this is kind of the difference, the way I help teachers teach this difficult history. But I think it applies in every other circumstance as well. So I don't know what Jason thinks about that. you know, I had the best teaching experience I had was being guided by a very smart principal in my first year who watched me make all the mistakes. And then a lot of it was intuition. I don't know what Jason can remember, but I remember him telling me, I'll be okay. There is this older teacher who's got my back. Do you remember that, Jason?
No, I'm sorry.
When you were a student teacher.
Yeah, I mean, Liz, I agree with everything you said. You know, there's that adage in education, nobody cares how much you know until they know how much you care. And I think that's, you know, if there's one takeaway from the movie that I would emphasize, it's that I don't care if you're teaching film or math or history. And really, it doesn't matter if you're teaching in DC or New York or Mississippi. And it doesn't matter if the kids are 3 or 13, they need to know that you care about them as human beings. And once they do, there's really 100 different ways, pedagogical approaches that you can use, but without that, none of those will work. So that, you know, that's I think that's the most important point from the movie. And my, you know, advice when teachers ask me as they're starting off is, you know, I don't talk to them about Danielson or Piaget or any of that. It's just get to know your students and let them get to know you. Be honest about who you are, and, you know, be yourself. It was funny in the movie. There's that teacher who says, "Don't smile until September or December or whatever it is." Like, that just sounds horrible to me. If you're funny, then be funny, and if you're kind of quiet, be quiet. But let the kids in so that they know you as much as you can, and vice versa. Get to know them, and then once you've established that, the possibilities really are endless. And of course, there are techniques and things to learn along the way. But again, those will all have a limit on their effectiveness without that core relationship.
So I agree 100% about getting to know the students. And as a narcissistic artist, that was a very, very, very hard lesson for me to learn. Because, you know, my response was, well, I'm doing so much for the kids, and why are they not appreciative of it? And don't they see how much I know, and all of these things? And don't they see how much I'm trying? And, you know, I had to learn that it's not about me. I mean, the title About a Teacher is really an ironic, you know, title, because it's the point that I needed to learn is that it's not about me. It's not about the teacher. It's about the student and where they're about. And in terms of techniques, there are a lot of strategies. And one strategy is that you can make sure that the projects and the work is authored by the students. So they themselves have an investment in it, and you show that you're interested in them and what they're doing and what they have to say. And when you generally show that interest and you show an investment in them, then they also have an investment in the class and what we're doing, because all of a sudden we're partners together in the ship. Right now, Zoom instruction is so difficult, and so many of the kids are so uninspired right now and so unmotivated. And, you know, I've been trying all sorts of things to keep the kids engaged. And one of the things that I told them just today is I said, you know, we're all in this ship together. And I said, I know there's some teachers who are just saying, well, if you're not going to turn your camera on, if you're not coming to the class, if you're not doing, there's only so much I can do. And I said, that's not the way I feel. I feel we're in a ship, and if we're sinking, we're all sinking. So we're all going to sink together. So we're in this together. And that meant a lot to the kids. One kid told me, you know, Mr. Harchol, you're the only one who actually talks to us. You're the only one who talks to us about these things and asks these questions, because everyone is so focused on what it is that they need to do. And again, I don't even blame the teachers for that, because it's the system. In New York, we have these Regents exams, which we just found out are now still going to go forward now. So the teachers are evaluated on how well the kids do on the Regents exams. And they have all of this material to cover. And they're like, I don't have time to talk to my kid because I have so much material that I have to cover. So it's like, it's just one thing after another, cutting the feet out from under the teachers. There's no way for the kids to succeed in this kind of environment. So it's as Jason was saying, there's so many things that are being done that are wrong.
So there are a few questions in our chat room that I'll throw out. So Hanan, this one is for you. Why did you make the decision to make the film a documentary?
Yeah, so I specifically chose to make the film not a documentary, and this but this is very, very important. It's filmed in a documentary style, right? So it's filmed in a documentary style in order to, almost like a cinema verite, this kind of like fly on the wall, shaky camera. We're kind of experiencing the jarringness and the craziness of all of it. By the way, it was shot by one of my former students. He's in his first year of film school. So, and many of my students came back to act in it. But the reason I chose to make it a narrative is because two of my favorite films are The Social Network and Spotlight. And if you know, The Social Network and Spotlight are both about actual events, but then it's scripted. And the reason that you script it is so you can craft a story in a way that's most engaging. I wanted everybody to know that this is based on my own experience, that it's based on a true story, that everything you're watching is true. But I also wanted it to be a narrative so I can very carefully craft the story in 3 acts so that it really engages you. You're at that moment where you feel, why isn't this guy quitting? And you feel like all hope is lost. And then it comes out the other end. But I did not want to make it Hollywood. I did not want to make it a Mr. Holland's opus. I did not want to make it this triumphant, celebratory, oh, they're all my best friends. Like, I wanted to show that just by the end of the movie, you see a glimpse of a light at the end of the tunnel, because that's what real life is. I still lose many kids I lose. But the idea is that I try at least to help more than I hurt.
And are you still teaching at the same school?
I am. The only reason I'm acknowledging that is because I didn't want people to think that the reason I'm optimistic is because suddenly, like, I'm at a private school or something like that. No, I'm still at the same school. Having said that, the school doesn't really matter because there are many things about my school that I left out. And there are many schools that are better or worse, but what I've heard, if you go on Amazon and you read the comments, there are 156 comments from teachers saying, finally, somebody showed what teaching is really like. This is from teachers all over the country. So what I'm trying to say is it doesn't matter what my school is. What is crucial is that I'm portraying the experience as it really is. And I made the film because I'm watching movie after movie, either showing teachers with their feet up on the desk reading a newspaper as lazy schlubs, or I'm seeing films where teachers are miraculously coming in on their horse and fixing everything. And it continues to be the single hardest job that I've ever done. And my father's a nuclear physicist, and my sister is an award-winning tenured professor at the top computer science department in the country. And I come from a family of overachievers, really hard workers. There's nothing that I have done that comes close to how difficult it is every day to spend 5 hours, a performance, really going in and observing and looking and seeing and listening. I mean, by the end of the day, every teacher that I know, no matter how experienced they are, we are wiped. It is by far the most difficult thing I've ever done in my life. And yet, the most rewarding, by far, by a mile, the most rewarding. And it should be celebrated like sports heroes are celebrated.
So, that said, I have to interject one of my own questions from watching the film now twice. That scene where the principal and the assistant principal come in and they're asking for lesson plans every day, is that real? And how I mean, do they really expect all the teachers, in classrooms like yours, really to have a lesson plan every single day? And that they really mark people ineffective if they didn't?
So I'm going to answer that from my experience. I'm sorry, Jason, would you like to answer that first? As a superintendent.
Well, go ahead. You created the film, so you go first.
I love it.
So do you want to talk about irony? So here we go. For the people who haven't watched the film, close your ears for a second because I'm going to give a spoiler. At the end of the film, there's a quote that says that with the new principal, the college readiness rate, which is the rate of how many students are able to be accepted into a 4-year school college, right, went from 30%, an abysmal 30%, which is kind of like the average, to an 80%. And it went in just 3 years, right? Did everybody? Okay, now you can, whoever's closing their ears can open up their ears. Okay, so I gave away that thing. The irony is that the principal who was responsible for that also implemented some very, very harsh tactics. And I, like an obedient, good Jewish boy, did every single thing that he asked me to do. But one of the things that was asked to do is to make sure that all of the lesson plans have every single element that's listed. And I had to first learn what each of those elements are, like, criteria for success and, the Webb's theory of questioning and all of these things, like depth of knowledge questioning. And I had to obediently learn what all of these things are and prepare my lesson in that way. What did that mean? With a small baby at home, I had to spend an hour and a half to 2 hours every night rewriting all of my lesson plans according to these specs. Interestingly, learning that and thinking about what all of these things meant actually made me a better teacher. It made me more prepared for my lesson. It really did. It really did. It made me really exhausted, but it made me more prepared. But yes, we were told that if we were being evaluated on 1E, which is, preparation for like lessons and all of that, and if we come in and we don't have a lesson plan showing how we prepared for what we were doing, we're going to get an ineffective rating on that. And that was made very clear to us. And why? Why did the principal have to do that? Why? There's a reason why. I'm not blaming the principal. I actually learned so much from that principal. I'm not blaming the principal. I'm not blaming that principal because the hands are tied. Because what ends up happening is that if there's a teacher who is not serving the students well, it is impossible to get rid of that teacher. It is literally impossible to get rid of that teacher. I remember when I got a grant and I left the school for 1 year to pursue my art, and everybody thought I wasn't going to come back. But I said, I am going to come back, and I did come back. But they're saying at least get tenure before, because they're trying to get rid of tenure. At least get tenure before you leave. And I said, no, I'm a good teacher. I don't have to have tenure. They're like, no, at least get tenure, because once you're tenured, they can't get rid of you. I was told by an administrator that of 300 people that they tried to get rid of who were tenured, they were only able to get rid of 7. It's like impossible to get rid of a tenured teacher. So what do you have to do? You have to have these draconian policies where it's like, well, if you don't have the lesson plan, I'm going to give you an ineffective, because finally they institute a policy that if you have 2 years of ineffective, then even if you're tenured, they can get rid of you. They have to go through crazy, mind-numbing scare tactics. And I don't blame the administrators, because the whole system is messed up. First, they don't prepare teachers properly. So teachers aren't prepared. And then, of course, the unions have to come in and defend teachers, because if somebody doesn't like a teacher, they can fire them. And that's also not fair. So it's like everyone is put in an impossible situation. The administrators are put in an impossible situation. The teachers are put in an impossible situation. The students are put in an impossible situation. So what's the solution? What's the solution? The solution is this: train teachers better. My wife is from Austria. And in Austria, what they do, or what they did up to a few years ago, they're changing the system, unfortunately, to make it more like the American system. But the way the Austrian system was before is that after you finish getting your teacher's license, you have to undergo a Probjahr. Probjahr means a trial year. And what does that mean? You're in a classroom, but for every period of every day, for an entire year, in the back of the room is sitting a highly experienced teacher. like someone like me, who would actually watch every lesson of every day that you teach for a whole year and gives you feedback after every single lesson for a whole year and say, you know what you did with that student? Try next time doing this, or try this for a whole year, every period. Where have I seen that? Unattending, right? Maybe as an attending, you can't perform surgery on someone, heart surgery, until you've been observed for 7 years by an attending. Because of course, how would you dare let somebody operate on someone right out of medical school unless they have an attending having observed them right over their shoulder for 7 years? Yes, but that's medicine. That's people's health. Education is equally as important as the health of human beings, maybe even more so. But we don't do that. Nope. You have your teacher's license. Good luck. Go. Oh, you've got 3 months of, teacher training where you basically stand in a room and once a week you get to teach a lesson. That's not preparation. So we can change it by preparing the teachers more. And who do we turn to get that preparation? We turn to experienced teachers, not experts from Harvard. If for anybody who's read the book, The Prize by Dale Russakoff, they spent $200 million on Newark, New Jersey public schools trying to reform the system, but they didn't ask a single teacher for advice. Teachers who are the ones in the front lines, knowing, like what Liz says, that it's all about building relationships and listening and learning from the teachers. Experienced teachers know this. So experienced teachers are the ones who should be at the forefront training and preparing teachers, and we wouldn't have the problem with the unions, and we wouldn't have the problem with the administrations and all of these things, because teachers would actually learn how to teach.
So this is a great segue to another question in the chat. And I'm going to direct this one to Jason. And the question is, can you give us some specific actions to help teachers learn more effective ways to teach? So can you take that, Jason?
Sure. I mean, we could spend hours, days, months, and years on that. I'm going to first go back to the point I made earlier and that Hanan made, which is the importance of relationships and establishing those relationships. But in terms of just straight pedagogy, I think, I taught middle school math, and one of the things that worked for me, and that I would advise other teachers on as they would come into the building, is the importance of structure and routine. I rarely found a kid who tells you that they want structure and routine, but they actually do. And anyone who's ever been a parent or grandparent knows this as well. And so I had a very clear way that my class ran, what sort of I expected from the minute I greeted my students at the door to the minute that they left. And that structure created space for us to have the kind of student-led conversations and such that Hanan was talking about earlier. Absent that structure, it was extremely difficult for me anyway to be able to have those kinds of conversations. And so literally the minute they walked in the door, I would greet them, and they had a portfolio that they kept all their work in. This was math, not art class, just to be clear. And they would take their portfolio down off the bookcase, go to their assigned seat. They had, I think Hanan used this term in the movie too, a do now, which is an opening exercise that they would do that allowed me some time to just make sure everything was organized. Anyway, there was a whole rhythm to the class and a very clear set of expectations that allowed me to just create the space for productive chaos to happen, if I can call it that. Without that, it would have just been plain old chaos, which isn't good for anybody. And there are lots of different ways to do things like that. There are lots of great books and techniques and maneuvers, and but like what Hanan said, I think where I grew the most is there were two wonderful teachers in my building, Mrs. Stewart across the hall, who taught English, and our school counselor, Mrs. White. And they just both kind of took me under their wing, and they would come and observe and give me feedback. And they did it just out of love, because they wanted me to be successful. And that enabled me to also go to them and say, hey, I'm struggling with this. How do I do that? And again, I think it comes back to the relationship piece. It's as important with kids it is with adults, and that coaching relationship. And if it's if you're not able to have a trusting relationship with teachers or administrators in your building, you're not going to learn and grow. So that's a whole nother ball of wax, creating that kind of environment amongst the adults in schools.
Interestingly, Jason, do you know who I learned that lesson about structure from? I learned it from my mom, who was a nurse, got her degree in Hadassah. My parents are Israeli. I'm also Israeli. And my mom basically had a GED. My father has a PhD in nuclear physics. And my mom, who's the much smarter one in the couple, just finished her GED and was a nurse. And I was lamenting to my mom. And she said to me, this was very early on in my first year, she said, they're children. Even though they're 15, 16, 17, they're children. And children need routine, and children need structure. They need a routine and they need structure. And I tried doing what my mom was saying, and she's not a teacher. And sure enough, once they had that rhythm, once they knew what was expected of them, I'm like, wow, you should be an administrator. It's like, it's amazing. So kudos to you. Yes.
So there's some couple of comments in the chat. They're not really questions, but some comments. One person, Paula, who I suppose is a teacher, says that her principal wants to see her lesson plans every day. So that's akin to the film. Liz talks about how student teachers being placed in classrooms with experienced teachers is a very effective way of training them. And another comment is that no different than sales, that if you want to engage people and have influence, it's always about me. A question comes in for Jason. As a superintendent, how are you able to make changes in the district to address some of the issues presented in the film?
I just tell people to change things, and they do what I say. Look, it's hard. School systems, large school systems are complex entities with lots of they have histories and they have ways of doing things, and they are change averse, generally speaking. And so it's challenging. But, look, I think I am in a unique position in that I'm able to speak as a teacher, as a successful teacher that can bring that perspective to the table. Also, as I think you've seen, I try to be pretty straight with folks and not defend practices that don't make a ton of sense. And I think that's disarming to a lot of teachers. I got an email yesterday from a teacher about the 16 different tests she has to give over the course of the year. And she was very surprised by my response, which was, wow, that sounds like way too much. We have a group now working to streamline that so that we have as much testing as we need, but no more than we need. So I've tried to lean into the reality that there are a lot of things that are broken, while also trying to, to emphasize this point. I don't think any teacher or administrator or central office staff person comes to work every day and says, you know what, I'm going to make things terrible for teachers today. And I don't think any teacher ever comes to work saying, you know what, I'm going to make things terrible for my kids today. I just think, you know, the different pressures, the political pressures, you know, whether that's from state law or local law, the intense internal pressure to make things better for kids. I mean, all these things sometimes wind up creating really perverse and strange systems, as Hanan has noted, that in many cases don't actually end up serving the purpose that you intend. So like, I think it's sort of acknowledging that creates a space for the conversation to happen. And then, yeah, I do set some clear priorities on some of the things that I do want to change. And I do have, you know, in some cases, I do have the power to just say, we're going to stop doing that. We're going to do something different. And that's, that's very rewarding to be able to do that. Like we had this policy that you could not transfer from one building to another if you were in your first 3 years of teaching. And I asked people why, and I got all kinds of strange answers, but it boiled down to just because that's how we've always done it. But if you think about what that means is if you're grossly unhappy at a school, and you might be much happier and more effective at a neighboring school, you literally will lose your job in Richmond, or you would have, if you tried to go somewhere else in your first 3 years. So I just said that's dumb and we're not going to do that anymore. So some things I can deal like that. Most things, obviously, the school board weighs in, and you know, I'm fortunate I'm able to work with a great team there. But that is one of the the gratifying parts of being superintendent, is sometimes I can just change things.
And I want to echo one of the things that you said, Jason, if I didn't make it clear before. In my heart of hearts, I do not believe that any administrator is intending evil things. You know, in my heart of heart, everyone is going about it in the way where they're basically saying, I'm trying to make things better. And what happens is that circumstances sometimes end up bringing out the worst things in people. And we know this from scientific experiments. You know, the famous experiment where they made people in charge, like wardens of a jail, and it suddenly brought out like maliciousness in them and things like that. I think that it's very hard to stay your best self when there are pressures happening from all around. I've seen teachers who are wonderful outside of the classroom suddenly show horrible signs of themselves when they're suddenly under pressure, or they feel like an administrator is evaluating them or whatever. So it's just the circumstances is bringing out the worst in people. It's not that people are intending it or coming at it from a bad intention.
So I'd like to ask another question. I don't see any in the chat room right now. Here's a question I'd like to ask. We can start with you, Hanan. I'd like both of you to answer. Since this is a Jewish film festival, I'm curious, how has your Judaism affected your teaching career?
It is completely integrated. So what ends up happening is, I'm just going to give the short version of the story, is that I grew up as a completely non-observant. I was born in Israel in a kibbutz that was anti-religious. But at age 39, the same year that I started teaching, I got involved with a project that ended up leading me to start reading Torah. And I started realizing that there are all of these very valuable lessons in the Jewish texts. And I started making these animations for the Covenant Foundation, animations that have been shown in this festival. And in each animation of conversations between me and my Israeli father, in each 8-minute animation are more than 100 Jewish teachings. And the teachings are all about humility, judging others favorably, kindness, chesed. And all of these teachings are applied in my teaching profession, right? So the idea, how can you learn anything? How can you listen? How can you hear if you're just trying to show everybody how smart you are, right? We're talking about that, right? In terms of teaching, that beautiful phrase that you said, right? They don't care how much you know, right? it's about how much you care. This is all lessons from Judaism about humility. It's about being like the earth, that, you know, that's how you can receive the gift. All of these teachings, the idea about forgiveness, the idea about anger and the dangers of anger, all of these things that I was studying in the Jewish texts applied then in my teaching. So when we're talking about standing in another person's shoes, you know, I'm judging the kids based upon my experience, but let me really hear what their experience is. Let me see, you know, this boy who lost his father at age 4 to gang violence and said that he makes a documentary about having to teach himself how to be a man. These are all real stories that they pitch. How can I possibly even imagine what that's like? So standing in someone else's shoes, these are all Jewish teachings. And just finally, what I found is that up until teaching, I'd always surrounded myself with people who had the same background as me relatively, who looked like me, who had the same education as me. All of a sudden in the school, I was a minority. The school was 4% white when I started, right? So what ends up happening is all of a sudden, I was in a different environment. And all of a sudden I felt what it's like to be a minority. So this is a very, very educational experiences for me. And my education in Judaism went hand in hand with my education as a teacher.
Yeah, thank you for that. Jason, can you address that as well?
Yes, just to kind of pick up on the last point that Hanan made, you know, I would say sort of at a macro level, you know, being Jewish has given me growing up an insight a little bit into what it feels like to be the other in America. And that insight has helped me, I think, have empathy for lots of young people that I've worked with who are considered the other for lots of other reasons in their lives. And I think that has kind of opened a channel of communication, not explicitly, but just in terms of deepening my own understanding of the impact that being the other can have on you, whether that is a function of race or where, you know, what country you were born in, what language you speak at home, what ability or disability you have, and all of those things play out so deeply in our schools that you know, having some understanding of that and openness to understanding that is really critical. And then I think more directly and more concretely, and Liz can speak to this, you know, I've always, I think, gravitated to the notion of tikkun olam, and, you know, I thought I was going to pursue that, as I said, through the law, but came to realize that education was going to be a better fit for me. So I actually have in my office at work, tzedek tirdof, right? Justice shall you pursue. I was very happy to hear that Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg had it in her office too. I did not know that, so I feel like I'm in good company. But yeah, I keep it there because it's very motivating to me.
Great.
Teven,
Thank
can
you
I
both
add
so much.
I'm so sorry.
Go ahead.
Well, I just wanted to add one last thing about this is that when I was growing up, remember, I had no kind of background in any kind of Jewish education. I didn't really study Judaism. So for me, what being Jewish meant was that when I came home with a 99 on a test, both my parents asked me, well, what was the question that you got wrong? A 99, great. What was the question that you got wrong? And people laugh usually when I say that because people are familiar with that story. So for me, being Jewish was, how much have I achieved? Look at what percentage of Nobel Prize laureates are Jewish. To me, Judaism was all about that kind of pride. When I started studying Jewish texts and I started realizing that the only way Moses is described in the Torah is that he has a speech impediment and that he's exceedingly humble, the most humble man to walk the face of the earth. That's how Moses is described. I started actually realizing that in the actual Jewish teachings, what we're taught to do is to use the gifts that we've been given, not to see how far we can make it, but rather to use the gifts that we've been given to help other people. That's what's at the heart of the Jewish teaching. And I only started learning that when I started reading Torah at age 39. And that ties in then with the essence of being a public school teacher. It's using the gifts that we've been given to help others and to educate ourselves so that we can improve as human beings in terms of what our contribution is to the world, to helping other people. And again, all of these paradoxes, if you watch my animation on kindness, on chesed, you find out, just like Professor Adam Grant in modern times figured out, but in the Talmud is written thousands of years ago, that actually the more you give, you actually paradoxically receive much more than you give. If you want to receive, it's not about how much can I get, it's about how much can I give, and what best ways can I give and help, and then paradoxically you receive so much more. That's at the heart of Jewish education, the real Jewish, and I never had the privilege of learning that because I didn't have a Jewish education.
So, Jason, but I don't know why we have. Here's a question for Jason. Please address the way Shalom School may have influenced you.
Shalom School is responsible for everything. Look, it was, for me, it was a very formative educational experience. Liz and her colleagues really were outstanding teachers. Again, using methods and techniques that were ahead of their time. It was also just a very nurturing place that was really about relationships. So the fact that, I still, have these friendships, these many, many years later with teachers from that time, I think is a testament to that. This notion of what Judaism is about. It's certainly about the ritual and the tefillah and all those things, which I love, and able to practice with confidence now, in large part due to the day school, but also about what does it mean in terms of your responsibility to the world. And so, I credit Shalom with a good part of that as well.
Great, thank you. So Hanan would like to share a short clip from one of his students.
I'm going to actually share two things. So the first thing is I just want the Covenant Foundation, which is responsible for doing all the animations. The animations are all free. So much better than the way I could have phrased the teachings. I'm putting the link in here in the chat for all of the animations. They're all free. It doesn't ask you to sign up to a mailing list. It's all on YouTube and it can be shared. And studying with these teachers has helped me so much. And it's really important for me to pass on those teachings. So you can watch all of the animations on chesed and judging others favorably and kindness and conflict resolution, all of those on that link that I put. And yes, I'd love to share one of my students. I just found out, and he's a student who came from Peru. He was actually born in the United States, but moved back to Peru as a child, and then came back and left his mother behind in Peru and came to the United States to try to get an education in film at our high school. And he just won first prize in a competition and is going on now to the nationals. And it's only 30 seconds. But I want you to see what a 17-year-old child can make. Take a look at this. It's only 30 seconds long. Does everybody see the YouTube link? Just watch it. It's 30 seconds, about saving. It's for a bank competition.
Oh, can you actually play it? Let's see.
Hanan, if you want to share your screen, then you can show it to everyone.
Okay.
It's not shared yet.
I'll share it right now. With the sound. Okay. Can everybody see this now? Can everybody see it? Yes, thumbs
Yeah,
up.
there you go.
And I just want to say, think about this.
That's
When a
great.
student, when a student authors something, it's their voice. They come up with an idea and they make it, and then it's recognized, and their voice is given acknowledgement, right? And they see, wow. And then on top of that, with the film that they're making, they're actually using their abilities to help the world, to help educate, or to help someone. There's
Hanan,
nothing
you
that
need
can
to
stop
turn
that.
off the YouTube. You need to turn off YouTube.
Me?
Yeah.
Am I still sharing the screen?
Yes, you need to
Yeah.
stop.
Your YouTube is still on.
I thought I stopped sharing the screen.
You need to turn off YouTube.
I'm not
I
getting it
did.
on my screen at all.
Yeah, I'm not seeing YouTube
I'm
at
not
all.
seeing YouTube.
No, but you're hearing the sound of YouTube.
No, I'm not.
me.
Oh,
I
no.
think it might be a window on your computer. That's happened to me before, by the way.
Well, it's gone, wherever it was.
Yes. So that happens to me all the time, by the way, Beryl, with my students. But I guess what I was saying here is that once the student sees that their voice is empowered, that something that they made is acknowledged, when they're holding a $12,000 check for something that they made, nothing can stop them. Now, all of a sudden, they're validated. They'll stop at nothing. So, this really, again, this is a CTE school, career and technical education, where in addition to the academics, they pick a major, and the major is taught to them by professionals, and they learn something on a professional level. They're creating things, and that then gives them all of the motivation to then do well and everything else too. So it's amazing what the kids are doing. I couldn't make that film, and I taught him how to film. I mean, he just.
Wow, it's great. Well, I'd like to thank both of you for being with us today. This has been a wonderful discussion. And I'd like people to know, in case you haven't seen the film yet, it's going to be available until Thursday at midnight. So tell your friends, tell your family, it's still available to watch until midnight. Craig just put the website link in the chat in case you haven't seen it. So thank you so much. We really appreciate you all being with us. And again, we will be sharing this video on our website in the near future. So I appreciate all of you for being here. This has been great.
Thank you.
Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much. Thank you, Sacramento Film
Bye,
Festival.
Sacramento.
Thank
Thank you.
Thank you, Jason. Thank
Bye,
you, Teven.
Jason.
Nice
Nice
to
to
It's
see
an
you.
honor.
Wonderful film. Really great.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
thanks a lot.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing this time. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm leaving gallery view open so y'all can say hi.
And thank you to Sarah Bloom, my executive producer, and the Covenant Foundation. Thank you very much. And to my mom and dad.
Coming from a former teacher, it was a great discussion, and I love the film.
Thank you very much. Thank you for letting me be so open.
We've loved all your work, and you sure nailed it. I watched your film and I said, oh my gosh, I got to call all my teacher friends, because that's exactly how it is every day. But we also like your shorts too. Fantastic. Thanks for sharing.
Thank you so much. Maybe you can help me figure out how to get the word out about it, because I got a lot of reviews. It has 100% on Rotten Tomatoes, but it's very hard to market an independent film. It's very hard to get the word out. So it is available on Amazon too after the festival is done too.
Yeah, I saw that, and I've been emailing people about that.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
On after the festival is over.
Thank you. Teven, thank you for those excellent questions. It was so great. And for bringing Jason, it was just so incredible. This was one of the best conversations. I really just felt completely at ease, and all these smiling faces and Liz, I could see you beaming with pride when Jason was speaking. You could
Thank
see
you.
like the fruits of your labor. It was just so amazing, so beautiful to see.
So I'm recommending it to all our teachers who are taking workshops from us. And I will buy the Amazon copy and put it in our resource library. So CVHN has a resource library for teachers, so it will be available.
Thank you.
Thank you. It's a great film, and it's going to be used and watched.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you
Thank
so
you.
much.
Hanan, I just wanted to ask if you had approached any of the teachers associations about maybe just giving them copies, you know, and then
So-
they will promote it further.
Absolutely. So I approached the AFT and the UFT.
Okay.
And the UFT basically said that they're too busy with COVID. And then the AFT, the person who's in charge of helping new teachers loved the film, asked me for 7 copies, which I gave her codes, and she sent it to people up above. And she basically just now is just not responding. I guess they're too busy with other things. It's a shame because I really, one of the reasons I was so excited to have Jason here is because, you know, my hope is that we can implement change. I think that especially now, you know, with a real dedication to education. And I was, you know, one comment that I was making is my wife and I have been watching The West Wing. We never watched The West Wing before. And it's a series that's 20 years old. And everything that they're talking about, what's broken with education, it's the same thing. And it was 20 years ago. They never stopped talking about it. So when is there going to be actual like change? So I'm really hoping, I was hoping that the film would be a conversation starter, and I thought it would come from the teachers, but so far I've not been able to get the unions on board, not yet.
Okay, so let's start with individual schools or school districts.
Yeah.
I think that might be a good spot.
Yeah.
I heard what Brenda said about Sac City. They have a lot of problems, but they're she nods. So different districts might be open to making this available.
It's something that unfortunately can't come from, like I did a lot on Facebook and reaching out to people, but there's a limit to what I'm allowed to do. You know, I was thinking maybe I'll just find all the emails of all the districts and email, but it's something that I simply am not allowed to do because there's a whole bunch of conflict of interest and things. It has to be something that's started by the teachers that are basically sharing it with each other, like hopefully will happen now.
Have you tried schools of education?
I have. So what happens is I've been invited to talk at the University of Albany. I spoke to one education class, and another University of Oklahoma. I did not charge anything. I did it free of charge. I'm happy to speak to the students. But I wrote to 50 professors from the top schools, and only one person wrote back. And I said that he did not want to be solicited cold. So I sent them the trailer. I told them I'm a teacher. I told them that I'm happy to talk to their classes. It's you know, Dale Resikoff, who wrote the prize, loved the film, and she put me in touch with Carol Rogers, who teaches this class. And Dale Resikoff tried to get me on a CBS morning show to talk about this. And the producer, you know, I'm a nobody. I'm just a teacher. So what can I say?
Don't ever say that. Don't ever say that. Let's keep the conversation going. I think Teven can give you my email address. And if anybody has suggestion, I'm open. I think it's a very important film.
Thank you.
It is, it opens doors to important questions that teachers face. How do you teach difficult subjects to diverse groups?
That's right.
And it's a beginning conversation that needs to happen in teacher prep.
you know, the movie was originally much longer, the script was, and I put in all this pedagogy that I'd learned, and people were telling me, cut out the pedagogy. I'm like, but I want to show them what I learned and how it worked. And like, so the film is really meant as just kind of a teaser. And the idea is that, so the film frames it, but the idea is that you go in and then you create these scenarios. So what do you do about the kid who's trying to disrupt the class with music? And what do you do with this kid? And, you know, the story of how like one kid was trying to take the class down and how I ended up making that kid the leader of a group. And suddenly once I empowered him, everything worked. And then other kids where I had to learn the comments from the kids that I would ignore. Like in which cases do you ignore the comment of the kid? And which cases do you speak to them one-on-one? And so like each of these scenarios in the film can be entire lessons for, you know, budding teachers on what do you do in all of these scenarios. So I'd love to go into that, but that of course doesn't make for a film, but it's something that could be expanded upon in training and helping new teachers, as you know, so.
Right. Well, again, thank you all.
Thank you very much.
Really appreciate the time, Hanan. It's wonderful.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me. Thank you again. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.